Hey, Stephen A.
Hey, I just want to say on behalf of the entire show, for you, Max, and everybody in between, obviously we've been going through a lot of tough times in this nation, but it's the greatest nation on the planet Earth. And if it were not for our servicemen and women, it wouldn't be that way. So we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to them. Our love, support, and everything in between.
I second that. Max, Ryan, good morning, guys.
Right.
And speaking of America, it would only be fitting if we start with America's team, right? So let's do that. Jerry Jones was asked about what he plans to do in the upcoming draft. Big Jerry, what you got for me?
Right now, it looks like we're in line for the third pick. Now, it could move up, could move down, but if it stays at 3, is it crazy to bring up the idea of taking a quarterback with the third pick or the second pick if you may have it?
Yes. You asked me if it's crazy to bring the idea up, and I'm answering you, yes. We're playing games here, guys, but it's not the thing to be talking about at all. You know, Dak is our quarterback.
Stephen A. Smith. Is Jerry coming around on Dak?
He sounds like it. I don't necessarily believe him, but he sounds like it. But I think particularly on a day like today, it's very, very important to mention this point that I'm about to make. You know, we talked about it. We just alluded to the folks that we want to honor because we live in the greatest nation on God's green earth. And then we have a team that calls itself America's team. I'd like to remind everybody they haven't won a Super Bowl since 1995. They've had 3 playoff appearances since 2009. They've been walking pieces of mediocrity for the vast part of the last quarter century. And I actually think a movement should be started as to whether or not Dallas is worthy and deserving of being called America's team, because we all know that answer would be an emphatic no if you're talking about football. Now, if you're talking about public relations, if you're talking about headlines, if you're talking about hype, you're talking about the star and the helmet, you're talking about those cheerleaders, certainly you might be America's team. But when you're talking about actual productivity on the football field, hell no. It's not applicable to the Dallas Cowboys. Now back to my point about Dak Prescott. Let me be very, very clear. I think that Jerry Jones sounds good. It's real easy to sound good right now because Jerry Jones is a businessman. He's a brilliant businessman, and he's very, very astute and adroit at avoiding saying the wrong things at the wrong time. For him to go out there as Dak Prescott was balling the way that he was balling, considering how moribund the Dallas Cowboys have looked without Dak Prescott since he went down with his broken ankle, considering the fact that he's fresh off a season in which he threw for 4,902 yards, 30 touchdowns, just 11 interceptions, completing 65% of his passes, and you still could not come up with a long-term agreement for him. Jerry Jones is smart enough to know that at this particular moment in time, while this dude recuperates from that devastating injury that cost him his season, knowing that Dak Prescott is still his best option, better than a Garrett Gilbert, better than an Andy Dalton, better than a Ben DiNucci and all of this other stuff, you damn well had better say what Jerry Jones has said. But in the end, the proof is in the pudding. It's where you sign on the dotted line. When you sign on the dotted line, instead of fretting over whether it's 4 years, 5 years, or whatever the case may be, you get this man signed to a long-term deal. Jerry Jones knows that to say anything otherwise would really be frowned upon by the American public. And as a result, he's smart enough not to say that. But we all know, because we all know football, at least to some degree, certainly not to the degree that Ryan knows it, but we all know, Max, that if you've got Trevor Lawrence available to you or Justin Fields available to you, and you're the Dallas Cowboys, if Jerry Jones couldn't sign Dak Prescott to a long-term deal, but still signed Andy Dalton as a backup, why the hell wouldn't he draft one of those top 2 guys if he were in position to do so? So it sounds good, but I don't believe him.
Is Jerry Jones coming around on Dak? Well, let me first address the Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence thing. Of course they should draft those guys if they're available. Dak's rookie deal is up. Those guys have been a rookie deal for half a decade. And those guys, look, Justin Fields reminds me a lot of Dak. Same size, more or less. Like his ability to play the position with his arms, with his legs, his leadership, all that stuff kind of reminds me of Dak. And I know you can think, well, but Dak is already Dak. You're hoping Fields becomes Dak, or maybe even better one day, right? But that lack of a guarantee means, hey, just pay Dak. Okay, is Jerry Jones coming around on Dak? No. He came around on Dak, Stephen A. Look, His mistake, Jerry Jones's mistake with Dak, was he was penny wise and pound foolish. He and Stephen Jones really wanted to milk that little $2 million a year salary before they had to pay him, and they waited until the 11th hour to seriously try to get a deal done. That was stupid. However, when it came time to getting a deal done, the last reports that I read were the guarantee was $110 million. Carson Wentz was guaranteed $107. Carson Wentz is a bad deal for the Eagles. I don't think they'd redo that deal. Like, if they could sign that deal again, I don't think they'd sign it again. I think Goff is not a great deal for the Rams, and the Rams are pretty good. But I think Goff's contract hurts them. Are we sure Dak is better than Wentz and Goff? I think he is at this point. If I had to order those three, and their kind of positions keep changing relative to one another, I'd have Dak right now number one. Right now, number one, even with a catastrophic injury. But they offered him guaranteed money, even if you want to say, well, the structure of deal was right in line with Goff and Wentz, which I think is a bad deal, but they offered it to him. Stephen A., when you say it's all well and good for Jerry Jones to talk and say whatever, but what does he do? What he did was offer Dak the deal, which Dak's side turned down because they looked at the CBA and what's going to change and believed a shorter-term deal was in their best interest. Patrick Mahomes signed a long-term deal. You know, Wentz and Goff signed a deal maybe not quite even as good as Dak would sign, but it's right in the ballpark. He turned it down. And when he turned it down, he bet on himself. And by the way, you think that's a pretty good bet, right? As durable as Dak had been. And then he suffered a catastrophic injury. And that is precisely the danger. That's why you take the guaranteed money. He didn't. But the question as to whether or not you don't offer him $110 million guaranteed.
Well, listen, I think like he believes in Dak, but he believes in Dak to a point. And that's probably the right way to feel. I said this before the offseason started. I said there is no amount of money that Patrick Mahomes can ask for from the Kansas City Chiefs that's stupid. There's no amount of money that they would think, you know what, this is just ridiculous. And we could see that by the deal that he got, even though it's actually kind of team friendly. But with Dak Prescott, Jerry Jones is like, we like you, but we like you to a point. So here is where I don't believe Jerry Jones. You think that if Jerry Jones has the number one, which he probably won't get because of the Jets, but has the number two pick, he's not going to seriously consider that he has that pick and Justin Fields will be available, or Trevor Lawrence might be available. Because when you look at now trying to get a long-term deal done with Dak, you could do that. You could do the deal with that in mind. Like, you know what? We're going to offer you this. You're coming off of injury. There will be these type of incentives in your deal. But you always know that if you go into the draft without Dak Prescott on a long-term deal, you can get one of these two quarterbacks. And trust me, the division between the measurables and the projections of these two quarterbacks is much less to me than everybody tries to make it seem. And Max mentioned Justin Fields being very similar to Dak. He is. The only difference is he's going to run low 4.5. He actually has a stronger arm. He's the better athlete. And so when you start to look at those things and you start to break those things down, I don't think Jerry Jones breaks his neck to make a deal with Dak. What he did was this. Jerry Jones is just when he has to be. He was very honest about trying to do a deal with Dak and what they were willing to offer him, and the fact that they had to do good business, because at that time, that's what he wanted the public to know, that we want Dak, we are trying to sign Dak, but we have to do it and make sure it's smart. Right now, he's being honest about out of convenience. Like, yeah, Dak Prescott's our quarterback because he understands he's injured. He understands how the team looks. He understands how it might be in the locker room, how people might feel about him talking about a leader that is obviously missed and obviously needed. But when it comes down to do business in the offseason, he's going to do business. He hasn't come around more to Dak any more than he ever was. If it makes money sense for him, it will make sense. If not, he tries to move on to the next best thing, which if he has one of those top two picks or one of these very good young quarterbacks.
Let me give y'all a perfect example of why the Dallas Cowboys have such significant problems and how they will be perpetual losers in all likelihood for years to come, or at least for the foreseeable future, because we've got too many apologists out there, too many people wearing pom-poms trying to celebrate the Dallas Cowboys. Case in point, the playmaker himself, three-time